History is filled with impossible people. People who appear out of nowhere, alter the course of civilization, and then disappear again, leaving future generations to argue endlessly about what really happened. Tonight's story is about one of those people. A teenage girl. A peasant. An illiterate farmer's daughter. Someone who should have been forgotten by history. Yet somehow, she became one of the most famous women who ever lived. She claimed angels spoke directly to her. She convinced kings to trust her. She led armies into battle. She helped save a nation. And she died screaming in a fire before she turned 20. But the strangest part, nearly 600 years later, nobody can fully explain how any of it happened. Some believe she was a saint. Others believe she was mentally ill. Some think she was a political tool. Others suspect history has hidden pieces of the truth. Tonight, we're stepping into medieval France to follow a trail of visions, prophecies, conspiracies, miracles, and mysteries. This is the story of Joan of Arc. And trust me, it gets weird. To understand Joan, we first have to understand the world she entered. France in the early 1400s was a catastrophe. Imagine entire regions reduced to ashes, fields abandoned, roads crawling with mercenaries, bandits disguised as soldiers, disease spreading through villages, families starving. The 100 Years' War between England and France had already dragged on for generations. People were exhausted. Many believed God had abandoned France. Others believed the nation was cursed. The French king had descended into madness, literally. King Charles VI suffered episodes so severe that he sometimes forgot his own identity. According to historical accounts, he once believed he was made entirely of glass. Imagine being a peasant, hearing that your king was afraid someone might accidentally shatter him. The kingdom was unraveling. And into this chaos stepped a girl from a tiny village called Domremy. Joan was born around 1412. Nothing about her childhood appears extraordinary. Her family owned farmland, they raised livestock, they attended church, they lived ordinary lives. Then came the moment that changed everything. Joan later testified that she was around 13 years old when she heard a voice. She described brilliant light, a presence, a feeling of overwhelming fear. Then she saw a figure. The figure identified himself as Saint Michael the Archangel. Soon 2 additional visitors arrived, Saint Catherine, Saint Margaret. Together, they became what Joan called her voices. Now here's the detail that often gets overlooked. Joan never described these encounters as symbolic. She never said she imagined them. She insisted she physically saw them, physically heard them, physically interacted with them. During her trial years later, judges repeatedly tried to get her to admit she might have been mistaken. She refused, again and again. No hesitation, no uncertainty, no wavering. The saints were real, the voices were real, the mission was real. And according to those voices, God had selected a teenage peasant girl to save France. This is where the story begins slipping into the realm of folklore. Long before Joan appeared, rumors circulated about a prophecy. The details vary depending on the source, but many versions claimed that France would be saved by a virgin maiden from the borderlands of Lorraine. Guess where Joan lived? Near the borders of Lorraine. Guess what Joan was? A virgin. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Now historians debate whether this prophecy actually existed before Joan emerged. Some evidence suggests versions of it were already circulating. Others argue that supporters retroactively attached the prophecy to Joan after her successes. But here's the important part. People in Joan's own lifetime believed it, and belief can be more powerful than facts, especially during desperate times. At 16 years old, Joan made a declaration that sounded completely insane. She announced she needed to meet the Dauphin, the uncrowned heir to the French throne. Imagine a teenager today demanding a private audience with the president because angels told her to. That was essentially what Joan was doing, yet somehow doors began opening. Local officials listened, soldiers escorted her, nobles became curious. People who should have dismissed her instead helped her, one by one, step by step, until eventually she reached Chinon, where the future king was waiting. And that's where one of the strangest stories emerges. According to tradition, Charles wanted to test Joan. He disguised himself among members of the court. Another man sat in a prominent position, pretending to be the future king. The idea was simple. If Joan truly received divine guidance, she would know which man was Charles. If not, fraud exposed. Joan entered the room. She walked past the decoy, ignored him completely, and approached Charles directly. Reports differ on exactly what she said, but the essential story remains consistent. She recognized him immediately. How? Nobody knows. Maybe someone secretly pointed him out. Maybe she had previously seen a portrait. Maybe the story grew larger with retelling. Or maybe something stranger happened. Whatever the explanation, Charles was impressed. And that changed everything. One bizarre chapter, rarely discussed today, involved Joan's virginity. Church authorities ordered examinations. Repeated examinations. Why? Because medieval Europeans associated virginity with divine purity. A confirmed virgin strengthened Joan's credibility. It's a strange detail to modern ears, but in the 15th century, it mattered enormously. After examinations, officials concluded she was indeed a virgin. For many believers, this was another sign, another piece of evidence, another confirmation that perhaps heaven truly had chosen her. Now we arrive at one of the strangest legends surrounding Joan. She claimed her voices directed her to a church called Sainte Catherine de Fierbois. There, she said, a sword could be found hidden behind the altar. People searched. According to contemporary accounts, they found one. An old sword buried where she indicated. How did Joan know it was there? That's never been fully explained. Skeptics argue she received information beforehand. Believers see divine guidance. The story spread rapidly. Soon the sword acquired legendary status. Some claimed it belonged to ancient heroes. Others said it carried supernatural significance. As often happens, the facts became wrapped in myth. Yet one mystery remains. A teenage peasant somehow knew about a hidden object she should not have known existed. Then came the event that transformed Joan into a legend. The city of Orleans was under siege. Its fall could have doomed France. Military experts were pessimistic. Many believed defeat was inevitable. Then Joan arrived. She carried a white banner, not a sword. A banner. Witnesses later reported that she preferred carrying her standard rather than fighting directly. She became a living symbol, a walking declaration that victory was possible. And something remarkable happened. French morale exploded. Soldiers who had spent years losing suddenly believed they could win. Commanders became more aggressive. Momentum shifted. And against expectations, Orléans was saved. To modern historians, this victory likely involved military, political, and psychological factors. To people living at the time, it looked like a miracle. During one assault, Joan was struck by an arrow. It pierced her shoulder. She fell. Many expected her to be carried away. Instead, after treatment, she returned. The sight electrified French troops. Imagine witnessing a teenage girl, supposedly chosen by God, return to battle after taking an arrow. The symbolism was overwhelming. The legend grew, and legends are powerful weapons, sometimes more powerful than steel. This is where historians begin arguing again. Numerous accounts claim Joan made successful predictions. Some were military, others personal. Some involved specific battles, others involved future events. The challenge is determining which reports are reliable. Many accounts were written after the fact, yet enough witnesses referenced these predictions that the question persists. Was Joan unusually perceptive, lucky, or genuinely convinced she possessed knowledge from another source? Nobody knows, but her reputation as a prophet spread rapidly throughout Europe. Not everyone admired Joan. Many feared her. Imagine being an English commander. You've spent years winning. Then a teenage girl appears, claiming divine authority. Your army begins losing. Rumors spread. People whisper, was she a saint or a witch? Medieval Europe did not always separate those possibilities cleanly. To some observers, Joan's success seemed unnatural. The accusations began. Sorcery, magic, demonic influence, deals with dark forces. The same events that inspired one group convinced another that something sinister was occurring. Joan's greatest achievement came in 1429. She escorted Charles to Rheims. There he was crowned King Charles VII. For Joan, this was the fulfillment of her mission. The voices had instructed her to place the rightful king on the throne. Now she had done it. Yet some accounts suggest her visions grew darker afterward, more urgent, more ominous. She reportedly warned that danger was coming, and unfortunately, she was right. In 1430, Joan was captured. Not by the English, by Burgundian allies. The details remain controversial. What isn't controversial is what happened next. She became a political prisoner. Eventually she was handed over to English authorities. And here's one of the most heartbreaking facts of the entire story. The king she helped crown made little meaningful effort to rescue her. The girl who had transformed his fortunes was abandoned. History can be brutally transactional. Joan learned that lesson the hardest way possible. The trial of Joan of Arc remains one of history's most fascinating documents because we still have the transcripts. We can read her answers, we can hear her voice, and she was extraordinary. Judges attempted to trap her repeatedly. One famous question asked whether she knew she was in God's grace. This was a theological minefield. Answer yes, and she appeared arrogant. Answer no, and she undermined her entire claim. Joan replied, "If I am not, may God place me there. If I am, may God keep me there." Even trained theologians struggled to corner her. A teenager was verbally outmaneuvering scholars. Oddly, one of the central issues during her trial involved clothing. Joan wore male military attire. To modern audiences this seems minor. To medieval authorities, it was explosive. They repeatedly questioned her about it. Why continue wearing men's clothing? Why refuse dresses? Joan maintained practical reasons. She lived among soldiers. She needed protection. Yet the issue became one of the key arguments used against her. A strange reminder that history's greatest controversies sometimes revolve around details we barely notice today. On May 30th, 1431, Joan was led to the stake. She was 19 years old. 19. Pause for a moment and think about that. Most 19-year-olds today are figuring out college, careers, relationships. Joan had already changed world history, and now she faced execution. Witnesses described her asking for a cross, praying continuously, calling upon Jesus as flames rose around her. Then came the stories, the strange stories, the impossible stories, and they started almost immediately. According to later accounts, executioners discovered something unusual after the fire. Joan's heart allegedly remained intact, refusing to burn despite repeated attempts. Can this be verified? No. Could it have happened? Almost certainly not in the supernatural sense. Yet the story spread everywhere, because people needed explanations. They needed meaning. Legends rushed in to fill the void. Another story claimed witnesses saw a white dove emerge from the flames. The symbolism was obvious. A soul ascending, divine innocence revealed. Again, historians cannot verify it, yet the tale endured. And the fact it endured tells us something important. Even people who watched Joan die struggled to believe she deserved her fate. Then things got even stranger. Years later, a woman named Claude des Armours appeared. She claimed to be Joan, alive, returned. Some people believed her. Astonishingly, she gained supporters, received gifts, was treated as if the Maid of Orleans had somehow escaped execution. Eventually, the deception collapsed. But imagine the cultural impact required for that fraud to work. People found it easier to believe Joan had cheated death than accept she was truly gone. 25 years after her execution, a new investigation reviewed her case. Witnesses testified. Evidence was examined. The original verdict was overturned. Joan was officially declared wrongfully condemned. Centuries later, she would become a saint. The alleged heretic became Saint Joan of Arc. History had reversed itself completely. So who was Joan of Arc? A saint? A visionary? A genius? A prophet? A political symbol? A teenager caught in forces larger than herself? The answer may be all of the above, or none of them. What we know is this: an illiterate peasant girl changed the fate of a kingdom. She inspired armies, terrified enemies, confounded scholars, and left behind mysteries that still refuse to die. The voices she heard remain unexplained. The prophecies remain debated, the miracles remain disputed, but the impact, that part is undeniable. Somewhere in medieval France, a girl stood in a garden and heard a voice. Whether that voice came from heaven, from her own mind, or from someplace stranger still, the world would never be the same. I have been your host Mordechai, and this has been Stranger Thangs.